Thank you, Madam Chair. The Dean of the Faculty of Law, KU, my fellow panelists, members of the faculty, students, ladies and gentlemen. I thank you for the honor and the privilege of addressing you today at this very important international research conference. We have had the privilege of listening to three very fascinating presentations, basically looking at challenges in the international sphere. And it is my role today, perhaps, to bring you back firmly to Sri Lanka and look at some of the challenges that face us in relation to labor and employment. Some of this will be relevant to most of you in the audience because you will go out, the students, when you do graduate, to become employees, employers, self-employed, and own account workers. So you will find bits and pieces of the challenges here will affect you directly. And for others, it will be in a policy setting sphere, perhaps. So I hope that there will be some discussion on how we overcome the challenges facing us. If you look at this list of law, these are the main laws on labor and employment. We have about 45 actually, but these are the ones that are in common usage on a daily basis. The ones that you have all heard of on EPF and ETF and gratuity for those of you who work in the private sector. But what is fascinating about it is that the laws that we use today, the ones at the top in purple, are pre-independence. The ones in the middle section, are post-independence, but before 1980 and before the current constitution, the 1978 constitution. Since the current constitution, we have only had a few very specific, very focused law changes in new laws. But the main body of law, you can imagine, is when you look at the first legislative enactment, which is even in use today, is 1934. So very clearly, given that most of you will know that the changes in law are very slow, this is a regime of law which is clearly not relevant or outdated for the world of work today. When you look at the nature of employment, you find this very clearly evident. At the time that data has been first reported in 1963, large part of the employment was in the agriculture sector. Now you know by experience that it is not so, that most of it is in services. A large growth has been seen in industry and manufacturing, and agriculture has shrunk dramatically. So most of the laws which were enacted looked at employment being in the agriculture sphere. But now, in the face of the changes that have taken place, where the roles have been reversed, the laws have not changed at all, or if at all, only marginally or peripherally. These have had problems and these have had an impact on the way the labor force has participated in the world of work. When you look at women's labor force participation in particular, for a country that has very high indicators in gender equality and gender equity, you find that the participation of women is, you know by common knowledge as well as reporting, that literacy and life expectation are both very high for women. You can only look at the universities, I'm sure Professor Senaratna will agree. Tertiary education, especially in law, more than 3/4 of enrollment is female. I have a class of 50 in my final year at the law faculty, Department of Law in Peradeniya. We have 6 males versus 47 females. So the gender balance is very much the other way in relation to tertiary education. So skills development qualification is very much in the female sphere. But when it translates into employment, there is a marked difference. In fact, you can see between 2006 and 2017, just over a decade, the drop is 34 percentage points. So women are not participating in the labor force as much as you would expect given Sri Lanka's advantages in terms of women's emancipation, women's education, call it what you will. Professor Arvind will tell you that the situation for women in India is very much different. Emancipation, rights to education access is very different, but in Sri Lanka we have achieved a very high degree of exposure and access in this area. But when it translates into participation, this is very low. And one of the key factors for this is legislation, and how this contributes we will look at later. Informalization of employment has been increasing. Informal employment is employment in areas where no records are kept, no accounts are kept, no formal letters of appointment are given. So when you look at this, this is totally very difficult to explain, because you have 42% of employment in the formal sector and 58% in the informal sector. When you look at agriculture, despite the plantation economy, which has been thriving and which has contributed much to the economy, you find that 85% of employment is in the informal sector. Same with non-agricultural sector, there is a high degree of informalization. This is not only employment in the informal sector, but also informal employment in the formal sector as well. So you have this conundrum where in a country where you have all this growth and technological development, that the informality does not seem to be reducing. When you look at segregation, segregation is where by gender is where men and women work in different areas. Sri Lanka demonstrates both horizontal and vertical segregation. Here we look at horizontal segregation where women seem to be confined in certain occupations. When you look at education and health services, which is basically our hospitals, you know by experience that most of the staff are female. So there is virtually 70% representation for females. But in other sectors where you would expect more participation, like the wholesale and retail trade, repair of motor vehicles, because or motor trade, really speaking, there is a 70% advantage in favor of men. There is only a very low representation for women, which seems inexplicable, given that when you do your grocery shopping every day, on the way home, you find that the staff in most supermarkets are female. But nevertheless, in terms of numbers, this is inexplicable. Same with transportation. Everybody you know, every female you know virtually drives a vehicle, but when it comes to transportation, public transportation or transportation for employment, this does not transfer into an advantage or representation for women at all. The same way look at hospitality trade, for instance. Hospitality again in other countries is run largely by female employees, but in Sri Lanka this does not seem to be the case. You only have to go to any major hotels in Colombo to know that the number of female staff are very low. Again, this has, of course, there are social and social norms which sort of prevent women from coming into non-traditional sectors of employment, but also the legislative impact has been severely felt in these areas. Now, recently there was a publication by the ILO on the future of work, because the ILO completes its centenary this year. And in future, for Sri Lanka, work is predicted to become more platformized, which is where occupations in engagements in mechanisms like PickMe, Uber, Yugo, Airbnb, which we all use now on a common basis. This is platform economy, this is platform employment, where you don't know whether a worker is a person engaged in driving a Uber, for instance, whether it is an employee or a person who is in employment for himself or herself, whether it's self-employment. So there is a large part of the workforce which is likely to be engaged in these sectors in the future. The gig economy is typically people who work in particular gigs, like Sunil Pereira of the Gypsies going and playing a gig somewhere. There are workers also who go and pick up jobs somewhere, do it for a little while, finish that, go and work somewhere else. So they are employees for a while, but they do not typically stay in employment for a longer term. Like specialized tasks, like for instance in internet-based occupations. There are other long-standing employment facing for employees like greater casualization. You find that even in the public sector now, when you look at the Central Bank annual reports, there is a cohort of employees called casual workers reported annually. So how this is possible, we don't know, because you will know from your labor law lecture, this number is here, you will know that a casual worker is not a worker who is in continuous employment. But by definition now, we seem to have employees who are called casuals for far longer than the law ever contemplated. And this is likely to increase rather than decrease. Similarly, you have the detested manpower agencies, which are third-party employment placement agencies in Sri Lanka, which seem to place employees behind a facade, where you do not know who the employee is. You have a facilitator who is basically operating out of a rented premises where you do not identify an employer, where enforcement becomes a problem in relation to labor rights and working conditions. Similarly, because of these types of occupations that are increasing, trade unions and trade unionization, collective bargaining is likely to decrease. Sri Lanka already has a very low trade union density rate. Probably less than 10% of wage employees are members of a trade union, despite the fact that our trade union movement predates our independence movement. You find that this is likely to become more, or rather less, the trade union density is likely to become lesser rather than more in time to come. Now, the labour law as it is, Sri Lanka's labour law, does not accommodate these changes. Because, for instance, working hours for men and women are different, with more rigidity for women. For instance, in the shop and office sector, women are not supposed to work for longer than 8 hours on any given day. On 5 days of the week, overtime is not possible. You and I all know that when we go and go shopping in the evenings, that this is not true, because there are women working beyond 8 o'clock. Women are not supposed to engage in night work, but we know that especially in the festival season, all the supermarkets, the retail sector is open till midnight, and the large population are female workers. So, the changes clearly are against the labour law. The changes that have taken place are in violation of labour law, in fact. Night work is highly regulated for women. In the manufacturing sector, you have to obtain permission from the Commissioner General of Labour to employ even a single woman in a manufacturing sector under the Factories Ordinance. Now, again, this has been found to be observed in the breach more often than not. Termination of employment for business operations is highly regulated, where for non-disciplinary terminations, you have to obtain again the permission of the Commissioner of Labour if you have more than 15 workers. So what do employers do? They maintain a workforce below this threshold of 15 workers by disguising employment, manpower agencies, casualization, fixed-term contracts, subcontracting, splitting off your business into smaller operations. You find that all these mechanisms are being observed or followed in order to get over the restrictions placed by labour laws. The ability to enforce labour law also to traditional inspection mechanisms is reducing, because the labour force is now at 8.5 million. Out of that, 40% is in the formal sector. We have something like 700 labour inspectors for the entire country. We have 42 district labour officers and 17 sub-labour officers. But by expecting these laws to be enforced by inspection is becoming nonsensical. We have to move towards a system of self-certification, like you would go and license your vehicle. You should be able to obtain a license to say that you are in compliance with most of these laws, but that is not permitted under. So you have internet-based work, home work arrangements, the gig economy, third-party arrangements. None of these are possible under Sri Lankan labour law, because part-time work is not possible, because every worker is entitled to the full benefits of all regulations such as EPF, ETF, paid leave. So why would you give paid leave off for somebody who is working from home? But Sri Lanka provides no exceptions. And given the way in which the law operates, it is very difficult to see these changes happening. Legislative change is only through parliamentary process, and you know how slowly our parliament works. Low trade union density again means that the workers who need protection are not represented. Their voices are not heard. When you have especially workers in the informal sector who do not unionize by nature, because they are dispersed, they are hard to identify, traditional trade union mechanisms don't work there. So this is again going to mean that their voices are not heard when labour law changes are being contemplated. Inability to increase capacity for traditional labour law enforcement, because you have only a finite number of cadre vacancies for this labour department and labour officers, and the lack of will and awareness of policymakers, because labour law reform is the last thing on anybody's priority list, simply because it is accompanied with a lot of political unrest and resistance. You only have to remember the protests that accompanied the attempt to shift some of the EPF investments to the private sector. So what does this all mean? We are talking about technological changes, platformization, But the labour law as it is contemplates a type of worker which does not really exist in Sri Lanka anymore. So what it really means is that you will have employment changing, you will have work changing, you will have the nature of work changing, but the workers will not be protected. Today in the morning on my way from Kandy to Colombo, I live and work in Kandy, work from Kandy, there was a news report to say that a very unpopular group of people, association, if I may say that, the Private Bus Owners Association, the president was on speaking and saying that 50% of workers in the private bus service are addicted to substance abuse, either alcohol or now more than that the hard drugs, heroin and crystal meth and all sorts of things, ice was being spoken of. So here is an owner or the president of the Owners Association saying that their operators, their employees are addicted to the substance abuse, and as a cause he says the high stress of the road, the traffic situation in Sri Lanka, the long hours worked and the lack of a timetable, and the insecurity of their employment is causing them to engage in these practices. Now, this is to me very strange. All these workers are covered by very stringent laws under the Wages Board for the motor transportation trade. How is it then possible that these workers are working longer hours and are being exploited? Clearly, the owners are saying so, and it is in their control to change this, but clearly they are not changing it. But how is it possible then that the Labour Inspectorate is not picking up on the fact that these workers are not protected? So this is going to be a symptom of employment if the law does not change to accommodate the new ways of working. So Sri Lanka has to look at where we focus on whether it is protection, whether it is enforcement, whether it is enforcement in the traditional sense, where every workplace is inspected and violations are picked up, or whether we are going to move towards a situation where workers are aware of their rights much more stringently, and where employers are forced to comply because they are supposed to do their self-certification. So these are the challenges that face Sri Lanka today, and in a context where the government is also an employer. We have 1.5 million in the public service, which is a very large percentage for a country of our size, and where a different set of rules and regulations operate for the public sector, not the same benefits as the private sector, but in some cases more, some cases less. This is going to become a challenge in time to come, where we have to pick a balancing point, whether we are going towards permitting employment growth, employment creation, and taking the advantage of technologies like Professor Griffin was speaking of in terms of 3D printing, for instance. If you were to set up something like that in Sri Lanka, we would not have a labour law to cover our employees because it is a completely new sector, and our labour law does not contemplate these new types of employment and jobs that are coming up. So these are the challenges which are facing Sri Lanka today, and in order to ensure that workers continue to be protected, we need to change, and we need to change rapidly. I thank you for your attention, and we will take some questions, I hope, later. Thank you.
In our audience. So the floor is open, and I think the panelists are eagerly waiting for questions.